So we're going to start making our bees. And one of the reasons I made the flowers out of the frosting was because I didn't have many choices on the size of my daisies. That was my choices, really small or really large. And this is so deep and thick, and these are so tiny. These work great for necklaces, and we'll be showing you how to use those. And if you can find some other ones, more power to you. But my bees were really so much bigger, and I know sometimes you do have the smaller flowers, and that's okay. But in proportion to my flowers, that I wanted to make flowers that were the same size of my bees. Now, my bees were all over the place. You can see they weren't uniform at all. They were crazy. And you got to remember, this was my first, actually second attempt. And so I did create some transfer patterns, and so that I can use them, and it's so much even. I kind of show you where I started here. I actually started on these little guys' wings, and look how much more uniform they are. I have 2 sets, and I do have them at miriamjoy.com. We have the single winged bees, and then we have the double winged bees. And you'll probably have a preference on which one you like better. That's going to be up to you, or you might like both of them. And these are laminated. But what we are going to be using is the clear frosting or the clear caulking this time. It says clear up here, and again I am using the DAP, the Alex Plus, and this is clear this time around. These probably aren't dry all the way here yet, but this works a little bit different. And I put these on last night, and they're hard to get off. So we're going to put them on wax paper instead of our sheets. This is a stickier, more flimsy than what we've been working with. It sticks a lot harder, and it just isn't as it pulls real easy. It's, how do I want to say that? It's not as durable. This was probably one of the first ones I did, and you can see here, it just really is a lot different. So, but I do want it for the bee wings. I think it really makes the bee wings, makes them look like bee wings. Now, the one thing that I did was I added glitter to these. We'll talk about making sure your bee wings touch so you don't have that issue with them coming out here. On these, I took some little markers and drew little veins on them behind them. So there's all kinds of things you can do with them. This one, I let it dry all the way. And this one, I did not. I added the yellow, and the yellow bled into the wings. Now you may like that look. That's totally up to you. On these wings, I added yellow tinsel. Actually, this is green, not yellow. To the wings. The tinsel is a long, skinny glitter. Tinsel glitter. I like that. But I really think that the bees need the glitter on the wings so that the wings show up. Otherwise, they're just completely clear and they don't always show up. Now, you may totally disagree with me, and that is okay. Do it your way. So we're going to put our little buzz here. But you can see my bodies and my heads and my wings were just all over the place. So that is the reason that I did make I guess it would call it like a transfer sheet. So we're going to take our transfer sheet, and I'm going to show you how to do both here. And we're going to cover it with our wax paper so you can still see through it and get the pattern. But it's going to be easier to get off. So that is the reasoning behind this. I'm also working on some ladybugs, so look for those. But again, these little transfer sheets, you can pick the single ones or the double-winged bees. I don't want that to move around, so we're going to do it there too at miriamjoy.com. And for the tips, we're going to be using the petal tips, like the rose petal tips, again, that we use to make our daisies. I'm going to go ahead and finish taping this up, and we'll get started. So I'm going to load up my bag, and we don't need a lot here. And this is kind of milky. It's not clear. When it's dry, it clears all the way. And like I said, we don't need a lot. We're doing both of our sheets just because I can. And I am going to be using, for the single bee, I'm going to be using the bigger tip, and this is a Wilton 104. So that is the tip I'm using on the single bee. When we get to the double wings, I'm going to be using one smaller, which I believe is the 103. Yeah, the 103. I think that doing the double wings, to me, is easier than doing the single wings, because you kind of have to get all that filled across. It's just weird. I don't know how to quite explain that. But the wide part is going to be at the bee wing outside, and the single, or the smaller part's going to be towards the body. And I have 40 on this sheet, 8 down and 6 across. I lied. You don't have to do these as close. You could do every other one. You could do every other row. I tried it and I was fine with it, but you do have to keep your hands out of it. So if you have to brace your hands, then adjust it accordingly. You could even just cut a row off and just use one row. Probably this way would be easier, but use how it works for you. If you do cut them with the scissors, just remember that the seal is now broken, so you don't want to immerse them in water so that your paper gets wet. So just be careful with that. Now, how I found that it worked best for me is to lay the bottom of my tip down and then just kind of push and then pull that towards the center. These need to be thicker. If they're too thin, they don't do well and they kind of tear. But we do need to come all the way into the body. The two wings need to touch so that they don't fall off the body. That's real important. So I found that it worked better for me to go down this way and do one wing at a time and then flip it over. You may find something that works better for you. So I'm going to push and pull, and I just have that tip up off, and I'm just letting it fill up until it reaches that, and then I'm pulling across. Now I know we're kind of covering up this bee's face, but remember this is going to dry clear, so that will not be an issue with the pattern. We'll be able to see it through our wings. And this helps already. You can see how much more uniform our wings are in size. And the poor bees that I have done in the past, they're still cute. They still need a good home. But this is, don't make it hard. And the more you practice, you can see my first bees, the easier it gets. So we want to push and pull these, but not too far over into that other wing. We want to try and stop in the body. If you get a little one that sticks up too high, when it starts to dry a little bit more, push that down. It'll just kind of pop up right now. And if you can tell, I'm not touching my tip on the paper. If you want to make these wings wider, go ahead and do that. In the past, I would kind of turn mine almost like a petal. But these need to touch. As you can see, they're touching because they need to stay attached to the bee body. We say that bees shouldn't be able to fly, or bumblebees shouldn't be able to fly. So we want our bees to be able to fly. Alright, now that these are drying and we're done with them, we're going to put our glitter on them. And I'm just using a real fine white glitter, or crystal glitter, whatever we call it here. Let's see if it tells us. Yeah, they call this crystal glitter. This kind of glitter is all over the place. And I'm using my fingers because I think I have more control with my fingers than I do putting it on with a little scoop or spoon or shaker. We can keep it more right towards the bee wings. My husband says that I am covered in glitter already. My dog usually has glitter on him, so you know he belongs to me. Of course, I say, hello, I'm Miriam Joy. I'm a glitterholic. So we're going to switch out our 104 and go to our 103. And I'm going to take all that clear caulking that's in there and put that down in the tip so I don't have to discard of that later. And we're going to load this tip up now. And we're going to do our double-sided bees. Now I found out, I think on these, that the bigger wing should be up on the top. And I was doing them 1, 2, and this one ended up bigger. So I'm going to kind of do these backwards from how I had originally started. I'm going to do this one first and this one second. So it ends up a little bit bigger. And to me, this one is just, like I said, easier. You can kind of do it the same way we did the other one. I'm not touching my tip onto the plastic, just the frosting. And we're just keeping those consistent in size, but bringing the ends into the body. Try not to bring them outside of any area that doesn't have a design in it. It almost looks like a heart. See our little hearts? If you wanted to, you could try doing these with a larger round tip, if that would be easier for you. Everybody has their favorites. I personally am going to stick with this one. Okay, once we've done our page, we're going to flip these around now. The bigger one is on the bottom, so we can do the, top to bottom now. And not have to worry about doing the top one first. Remember, we still want these to meet up. In the middle. And if it doesn't, come back later. Kind of make sure that those get all the way across, because that is what secures those wings onto your little bees. Because it is a different type of texture than our other ones. We're just going to continue working all the way until I get these done. If you only wanted to do a couple of bees, to me it just seems kind of silly to load it up, get it all done, do 2 or 3 bees and be done. If you're doing a card or a frame, you don't need that many bees. But if I've got them done ahead of time, I can just reach in there and grab a bee. So just be careful now. You don't want to get your hand in it. This may be where if you wanted to cut it separate so you can move it around and not get into it, you can do that. Do whatever works for you. We want to again make sure all these touched. If not, we need to get them there. Okay, now I'm going to come back. I'm going to add my glitter again, and then we're going to let these dry till they're clear like that before we start our bee head and bee body. For the bee bodies, I colored our frosting with buttercup yellow because we want that more bee color. We don't want them a bright yellow color, school bus color. They're not really that color. And I am using a number 10 round tip. If you find that you need to do a different size, up or down right there, you can do that. So what we're going to do, these are not quite clear all the way, but they're pretty much dry to the touch, so they should not bleed. So we're going to do a round circle, and I'm holding it at a 45-degree angle. And we're going to pull that back towards the body. And then we're going to start this body process, and we're just going to squeeze that out, get that body in there, and pull that tail up. And you actually get like a little stinger on our little bee dude. So the round little head, and then we're going to do that little body and pull him up. The more you kind of squeeze the body, the fatter he should get. If you even wanted to do him and with a bigger tip, you could if you wanted it a little bit fatter. That's just a personal opinion. And if you wanted to do a black head and do a yellow body, you could do that. Now I might let those two dry before I put them together because I would worry a little bit about bleeding again, but you could experiment with that and check that out. But you can see how much more consistent these are, and we've got these cute little bee bodies going along here. And once that kind of starts to dry, we're going to talk about their little antennae. And I used flower stamens. I had a tough time finding anything other than white where I was looking. So this is kind of what I had, and I thought about spray painting these white. But we did go ahead and order some in, so if you need some of those, you can check those out at miriamjoy.com. and we'll help you with that just to make it a little bit easier for you. But I took about 10 of these at a time and used my wire cutters and cut them. We'll see if I need to make these a little bit longer, a little bit shorter here. But you want to do this while your bee body is still wet, while you can still stick these in. And you may even want to consider doing them a row at a time. I had thought about that as well. And I wondered if I was going to hit the inside. So you're going to have to decide if you think that is too long. If you want to go shorter with those little guys or longer with those little guys. That is a personal opinion. You could put them on with a liner, but I think that they are so fragile. They are very hard to get off and use and keep them intact. And you don't have to put the antennae on. My first batch of bees did not have any antennae, but I think these really make the bees. I think these really give it character. So that is a personal opinion. I will leave that up to you. And the bee body is done the same way on the single as the double. We'll do a couple of doubles here, just so we can kind of make sure and see how it does it with the wings. Make sure I get the right batch here. So you know how it looks and how it behaves. So again, circle, holding it at the 45-degree angle, pull it back, and then start that body, make it nice and full, and pull it down. We got a little fat guy there. Remember, your template is only an idea. If you need to put that head up more above it, then do that. There is no right or wrong on that. And I can't tell you how much easier it is to have an idea of where you're supposed to be going or the size you're supposed to be doing. It makes it so much easier with the pattern. And with the yellow head, you can put the black eyes on. If you do the black head, it would look kind of funny with white eyes, but you may want it that way. I will leave that up to you, but we're going to let those dry really, really well, and then we're going to talk about putting the stripes on. And some people pipe them on. I found it much easier, and I liked it better without the piping, putting them on with a permanent marker. So when we're doing the bee, let's explain this one more time. We're going to push at a 45-degree angle. We're holding our bag, and the reason we're doing that is so you have a smooth surface up front. So you can put the eyes, and if you want to put a little mouth on there, draw a little smiley face, you can. And then again, holding the bag at a 45-degree angle, push harder this time. And then start to pull out towards the tail and then bring that up. And you get that little stinger. So we're going to do that one more time. At a 45-degree angle, we're going to push and make our round little face. We're going to stop right there. We're going right over both of those other wings, right down the center. And then we're going to push again a little bit harder this time. And start to pull up and out as we go. The bees are coming. The bees are coming. The bees are coming. Okay, one of the things that I noticed when I was working on the bees, because I had never worked off the sheet before, I would do this row, put the antennae in, do the bodies of the next row, put the antennae in. That way you're not getting your hand into the row above you. I did have just a tiny bit of bleeding, just a little bit, so they should have dried till they're clear all the way. Just on the double wings, they were probably the last ones that I did. But let's go ahead and show you how I finished them off. I can't believe how much better these are than my first ones. I mean, I thought these guys were so cute. Look at his smashed little face and smashed body, and oh my gosh, it's sad. But hey, they were fun, and we've learned from that. So just keep on growing. Okay, so what I did with these, the easiest way to get these off, and make sure you do the wax paper. If you don't, you throw your sheet away. It's what I finally did with mine. I tried all kinds of different ways to remove these, and I ended up just doing it with my fingers. That was the best way and the easiest way to get those off. I just started gently peeling and doing it from one side of the bee wing. Get under the body, get both of those. Don't separate those because you don't want to. And gently pull that wing off. Don't do it hard. We've still got some little unevenness here, but hey, that's what it's all about. So on these guys, what I did was I used an Identipen, and this is a permanent marker. This is one of the few pens that I know of that is a permanent marker that you can use and then spray varnish, and it will not run. If you do not have one of these, spray varnish them first and do this afterwards. This is really important. I can't stress that enough. And if you wanted to do thin your frosting out and do it with a liner work, you can do it that way, but I don't think you'll like it nearly as much, and it'll take a lot more time. So this has two ends, a large and a small end, and we're going to be using the large. And what I did first was I came in and I put the eyes on, and you want to make sure that they are even. And now you can see why we left the antennae kind of flat, is so we can get the eyes in on our little bees. Now, remember how I had talked about smiles on these? If you had room and you wanted to put a smile, I use a small end and give them a smile. And I think it just is really cute. I know it isn't really correct with the way that the bee is, but that's okay. We don't care as long as it makes us smile. So now we're going to come in and we're going to put our rings on our bee, or our stripes on our bee, and we're going to talk about this just for a second. If you notice the pattern, I have them going one direction, but if you can see on the bee, I actually did it the other direction. And this is just an idea. It was just to give you an idea. And the reason that we're doing it this direction, if you can really look, the frosting has kind of rings on its own with the way we piped it. Some of you will have more, and some of you may be smoother. And if you want to do yours the other direction, do them the other direction. But I just follow those lines, and that makes it easier for me, and I'm not fighting anything, and it looks like it belongs with the bee. So I'm going to put 3 lines on here, and that first one I want to put real close up to the top of that body there. And then the second one, and then that third one getting closer to its tail. And then I bring those over to the edge a little bit. Try to keep my magic marker off of my wings. This guy actually has room for a little smile, so we'll add a little smile to him. And see, even as quirky as he is, sometimes that's what makes him fun. We had talked about if you want to put veins on the back so you can kind of see it through on the front, it would just kind of give it that little image there. So let's do another one here. So we've got a real fat one here. So he's going to closer to that top here. Don't try to get all the way to the sides when you first start. Do that as kind of the cleanup part. And try to keep your stripes even as much as possible. This isn't perfect. Don't worry about it being perfect. This line is not as fat as the others. Just going to try and even him out here. When you're doing the ones on the side, you can pull those wings back. Just be careful. They're a little bit more fragile than the rest of it. And there's our little bee. The one thing you could also do, if your line was a little bit further down, just be real careful in taking these off. Don't yank these wings. If your line was a little bit further down here, you can come in and put a thinner line right where the head and the body separate, just to make that distinction. So that kind of shows you where the head is, but it doesn't look like a stripe. So we're going to go ahead and stripe all of our bees. The other thing I wanted to tell you is take them off of your wax paper when they're dry. You don't want to leave these sitting. The longer they sit, the harder they are to get off. And do not varnish them on the wax paper. That makes them even so much harder. I'm going to varnish mine on my tray and just do it right like that. I'm not going to worry about varnishing the back of them because the backs are going to be glued onto my gourd. I took a couple of my bees and I just colored them with the permanent marker on their head. And aren't those really cute? I think that even makes them look more realistic. I don't think you need the eyes on those. I really like that. I may have to do one with just the little black heads. I think those are really, really cute. So we're going to work on coloring our leaves. And I've done the ones in the middle here. We have 2 rows on each side, so they're kind of different leaves. You can leave them. You don't have to do this, but I think this is really where the artwork shines, is in the coloration of the leaves. It shows the movement of them, and it makes them so they're not so one-dimensional. So we're going to start by floating color on each side of the veins in the middle of these leaves. I'm going to use a darker green. I have green Isle. This is a dark green. It's on the bluish side. So something along those lines. Don't think that you have to do this color. I always am doing a different color. Every time I do them, I probably pull a different color. So do what you have, what you're comfortable with, what you think looks good. Use that. Don't go run into the store looking just for this individual color. I am going to take my leaves and set them on the side so that the first floats I am pulling straight down. If you pull it towards you, it's easier. And we're going from fat to narrow with the leaf. And we're going to float color. You will sometimes hear this called shading or highlighting depending on what the color is, whether it's darker or lighter, whether you're using it for highlights or shading. So, but it's floating color. I'm going to use color float. It makes it easier. If you know how to float with water, go ahead and do that. There's nothing wrong with that. This is just a little bit easier for those of you that don't know how to float with color, and it also lasts a little bit longer as we're working here. So I'm going to put my brush into the color float just a little bit, rub it on both sides. We're going to dip my brush halfway or less in the paint, depending on how big our leaf is. You can see that color. And we're going to pull it down, blend, blend, blend. You're going to see the color goes from solid to nothing, and that's what we want. So, and on our leaf we may turn it a little bit when we come to the end so that we're bringing less color at the end of our leaf. And I'm going to pull that down. And some of these got some whoop-de-woos on them, so these are going to be fun to get into. And then when your color starts to run out, we're going to do it again. If you get color all the way through, stop and wash your brush out, completely dry it, and start exactly where we started the first time. So we're coming all the way down on those. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and flip this and show you the other side. I do also have a video on how to float color, which goes into a little bit more detail. Now this one, we don't want to pull from top to bottom because this would be the widest part, and it's harder to work that way. So we're actually going to turn this to the side and pull it sideways, and that makes it a little bit easier. Now if you'll notice, we have the middle, which doesn't have any color on it, so that's more the highlight. So that looks real good. You can sometimes load your color without loading the float again if it's working well. Okay. Remember how we talked about if our leaves weren't perfect? So all you gotta do, just trim them up. Try not to make them look harsh, but you can just simply trim them. One of the things we're going to talk about that you could add is mica powders or pigment powders. There's all kinds out there right now for nail art, epoxy resin, all that kind of stuff, and all of that works. This is actually Pearl-Ex, which you can find in your scrapbook section. Blue Whale Arts has a good selection, so there's lots of different things that you're going to do that. I wanted to show you this. I actually did not use it on this project, but I use it a lot and wanted you to have the option. And if you wanted to highlight one of your flowers or your leaves, you could just put that like on that area. See the difference between that and that? And you could even come back and put a little bit of, can't get a lid to go on here. Don't want to spill that. A little bit of gold in certain areas would really set that off. I think this is the guy we were working on. You always want to tap it in your lid first. You can see how much pigment powder is there. There is a ton. And if you go straight to the project itself, you will have just powder everywhere. So that's the reason that we do that. And if you think that's too bright, then take your brush, knock that down a little bit, or take that other color and go back over the top of it. My favorite is the Inca Gold Metallic Rubs, and I love this stuff. It is a wax-based product, and there are two greens, and this is jade, and we are not going to use that. That's more of a blue green. For this, we're going to use more of the yellow green, and this says green yellow, so they got it backwards. The one thing they tell you is to put it on, rub it on with something. They don't want you to put your fingers in it. So these are kind of like a petri dish, and they will have little things grow in there. If it grows, I take a baby wipe, clean it out real well that has the alcohol or disinfectant in it, and try and start again. If you do happen to have them get hard on you, I do have a video on how to soften them up again, because this is one that I've softened up twice, and look how creamy that is. So the thing that I do before I use them is alcohol my hands down with my hand sanitizer really well. So now my hands will be all crinkly again, but hopefully that helps keep it from growing fungus in my metallic rub here. You can get those on eBay, Amazon. Just type your alcohol inks or Inca Gold in there, and it's by Viva. I found mine at Joann's the first time I bought them. I don't know if I've seen them since. So I have a little bit on my finger, and what we're going to do is try to rub the highlighted areas. That guy's a kind of a poor one to start with. Now this guy, we're going to leave him on the sheet. We're going to rub him on the edges, because that is where the highlights would be, and right down the middle. So we're going to rub on the edges. And right down that middle. And just keep working that way, and reload when it starts to get less. But the cool thing is you start to see the highs and the lows of these leaves. We'll get to the others that really have a lot of detail or curly. So if you're making leaves and you want them to have more of that detail in, then put a lot of pressure when you're making it, going back and forth to get more ripples in it. Now on these little guys, they don't have as many, so we're going to do the edges, highlight that, and it doesn't have a center, so we're not going to worry about the center this time. We're just going to do our edges and do it that way. There is no right or wrong. I love this stuff because you can just throw it on and it looks good. I use this with my molds a ton because it picks up all the detail and it looks really cool. So let's do some of these down here that have lots of ripples now. We're going to do all those lumps and bumps. Isn't that cool? So we get all those ridges highlighted. Okay. This is a real good time for your wet wipes, especially because they're antibacterial, so clean your hands nice and well. With your flat ones, you could even come back in here and just hit some highlight with a little bit of the yellow gold. Yeah, yellow gold. Make sure that's what it is. Just to give it even a little bit more of a highlight, to add a little bit more dimension to these because they are flatter. And if you even wanted to, you could come back in and hit them a little bit with your mica powders. So let's put a little bit here and give it a little bit of a sparkle. Isn't that cool? I think that kind of adds to it. We might have to think about putting some of those and some more. I said we didn't use it on this project, but here I go. But that's what I want you to do, is think about things, adding, doing your own touch, doing your own thing to it, making it yours. So go ahead and finish up your leaves, and let's work on. So I've got my leaves all done. There's one that I didn't hit the lid before I hit the leaf. I am going to spray varnish these before I put them onto my gourd. I had kind of talked about this and had thought, is this hidden, or do I want to do it all after? But I have so many layers sitting on top of each other, and I want to keep the color all in. Except for the bees, I'm going to spray varnish them as I have them finished. This also helps keep like the mica powder, that kind of glittery shimmer on, as well as helps seals the paint and everything. Because this is a just Krylon. I'm just using Krylon gloss. I feel with the bees it needs to be glossier. It's supposed to be more of a frosting type thing, so that's the reason I'm going with gloss. You don't have to. You could use satin, you could use matte, whatever you want to. I just really feel with the color added that you need to seal these. Otherwise, you really don't have to. But we're adding so many layers on top that I really feel that it's warranted. So these are our daisies, and they're all the way dry, and I've left them on the paper so I can work with them still. And I like how they kind of curled up a little bit. I think that gives them some life and movement here. I like the brighter yellow, and here are some of the ones with the darker yellow, and you can see how stark this is. And we're going to end up doing it a little bit more subtle. We're going to paint that. We're going to start by floating green around the inside, and what that does is that really brings the center forward. It divides the petals from the middle. It really stands out. If you ever have something and you don't know what it needs, a lot of times you need to float color around that to move it forward. So I'm going to be using the color float. This helps you do your float, and we're going to dip it into the color float, and then we're going to dip this about halfway or less, and we're going to blend this out quite a bit. Now, your color you use is going to depend on what you like, what colors you've used, what color you used in the middle. For this one, if I can find it here, I used from Delta a medium foliage green. So a medium leaf green. This is more in the yellow family, not the blue green. So that is the color, but you do not have to have that exact color. Do what you like. Do what you think looks good. I'm always changing them up every time I do them. I'm going to come back over that guy. It's too bright of a green. We'll fix him in a bit here. Let's start with a bigger flower here. We don't want it really dark. We just kind of want to give it that color. You also could try brown if you wanted to. I did brown originally, and I just think that the green is more natural and it just sets it off so much better. So you can see the difference and how it moves that forward. So I'm going to load into my float and then halfway in my paint and blend it and walk it out. And we're just bumping that right up next to the center there. If you don't want it quite as wide, don't load it as much, or you can also kind of put that brush up on an angle. That was a little bit bigger area, so if you need to reload halfway through it, then stop and reload. So we're going to go ahead and let's do a half one. We got a halfy here somewhere. So this guy is just going to be right where it is touching the center only. Another thing that I did as well to kind of give it some life here is I would come and pick 2 or 3 petals and just kind of add some color like that. Not too much, just a little bit. So you can pick them next to each other, or you can pick them apart. There's no right or wrong on that. Just whatever. Not too bright. Just a reflection of color. So this little guy, we need to do him smaller now. So we're going to load just a little bit of paint. And we're going to bring him around that center. Get those little micro balls out of there. See how cute he is. So let's go ahead and finish up all of our daisies. I'm going to put a little bit of liner work in our daisies to bring in the brown and kind of think of the colors that we've been using or will be using on our project. I'm going to be using raw sienna on this. This is kind of yellow brown color, so anything along those lines. I'm going to be using a liner brush. This is a 10-aught. Anything with a thin little tail here. And I'm going to bring my water in, and I'm going to pull it out of my paint and twist it as you pull it out so that you get a little bit of paint on there, not too much, and you want it like ink consistency. You don't want it too much. You could even go to a smaller brush if you wanted to. So set that here. On these flowers, they have little lines already if you kind of look for them. And that's what I tried to do, was try to find the lines of the leaves and follow those. And I don't want these too dark. And if you feel they're too dark, kind of touch them down a little bit softer touch, and 1 to 2 little veins, lines per petal is all we need here. I'm going with a lighter touch so I don't have as big of a vein. You could go to a smaller brush if you wanted to, or you don't have to do this at all if you don't like it. By the time we get done here, I think you'll like it, but you could stop at the green part if you wanted to. Keep it nice and white and pretty, and however you feel it should look. There is no right or wrong. I know I've said that 100 times, but people get so stuck in, well, Miriam did it that way, so we have to do it that way. I do things different every time I do it. I forget half of what I know. I have to watch my videos to retrain myself on some of the things I've done because I forget as much as I remember. So, alright, I'm going to go ahead and finish up all of these guys. So for this batch, I'm going to leave them white. I am going to talk to you about what I did for these to make them different. Again, I'm used the Inca Gold, and this is Old Silver. And I just took it, I already put my hands in the alcohol, and go over the edges or the petals with this. And it gives it that metallic kind of look, kind of blends everything in. So if you like that, then do that. I like the look of that, but I do want to try one that's more bright this time. And I just want to see how different, so you can have some options here. But that's what I did with that. It really helps show all of the different textures in the leaves, just like it did with the petals, just like it did with the leaves. So that was one nice thing to that. So if you like that, then go ahead and do that. So after I did the petals, I am going to do the middles. Again, you could do mica powder, pigment powder on them instead. We've already got the micro beads in there, but I'm going to put some gold on top of these. Now those little guys that are raised up, it's not going to matter much, but it's going to give them some highs and lows. These guys look really cool when you do it. If you didn't want to use the gold, unfortunately, I have not found any Inca gold that's brown. So you could use shoe polish that's brown, because it's the same thing, kind of thing. It is a brown wax. So think about that. But see how that's already kind of setting that back in so that it's not too bright, but it brings out all of the fun ridges and everything. If you're worried about the microballs, kind of go around them a little bit. If not, just go through them, and what falls off, falls off. And we'll do a couple more with this lumpy bumpy part here. Try and get down and up in that a little bit. But again, it's all a personal opinion. What you like, what you don't like, what you want to try, what you don't want to try. And that's it with me. I just sit down and start playing. An artistic chemist. I haven't blown the house up yet. Had a few close calls. Almost caught a church on fire. That's a fun story. Right, Sharon? Don't leave a glue gun unattended. That's the moral to that story. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and finish these up. After I have finished these up, I will probably pull them off of the wax paper first because they're a little bit more sticky than their leaves. And then I'm going to varnish them as long as they're nice and dry. Since we decided not to do the Inca Gold on this, I decided to go ahead and put some pigment powder on it. And so much for me saying that we weren't going to use this on this project. This is kind of a bluish color, and I've been wanting to bring blue into these. The interesting thing is I'm trying to look for what it tells me it is, and it's trying to tell me that it's green yellow. 682 from Pearl X. That's not green yellow. That looks like a sky blue or something like that. More of a blue color to me. And I am going to put that just where we put the green and the shading color. You could do green, you could do yellow. You could do green yellow. And I'm going to do those little tips. You could even do another little tip over on the other side if you thought that it needed it, but I just wanted to kind of set these off. I think it just kind of helps pull it together, and like I said, I had really been wanting to bring some blue, and every time I tried blue I did not like it, but this way it's little subtle. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish these, and then I will varnish them. So I forgot one thing on these, of course. I had splattered these, and I think it just kind of makes it more country feeling. So I'm going to do this batch. I'm going to take a look at the white ones and see if I want to do them or not. So there's a couple ways you can splatter, and one is with a toothbrush. Wet your toothbrush down, rub it into the dark brown. And I am going to be using maple syrup, but I'm going to be using a fan brush. So I've dipped it in my water, I've got it pretty wet, and we're going to come in here and just pick up our paint so that you have it nice and full. And with this you get more control. Take a bigger brush and start to hit it. The bigger the dots, the more we need to water it down and get some paint out of there, so we don't have quite as much paint. And I might have to go find a bigger brush to hit with. So we want fine little dots. We don't want them too big, but we don't want them too small. And I've got them a little bit smaller than I would like them right now. Third time's a charm, right? But with the toothbrush, you don't get to adjust. It goes where your thumb sprays and everywhere else. So think about that. And I might have to do the white ones. It just kind of seems to blend it all in, and like I said, it kind of gives it that country feel that we want with the bees. When it starts to run out, you're going to start to get finer ones again, so I'm going to stop and reload. I'm not going to dip it in my water. I'm going to use what I still have over here. Okay, I'm going to finish this up, and then we might switch over to the other flowers. So I have put this one out to dry outside, and I shouldn't have put it outside in the sun, because what happens is you can see all the moisture trapped in here that can't get out, and that moisture has changed the color of the caulking from the dyed brown. Now if you do the white, it doesn't matter. It doesn't change it at all. It still looks nice and white, and I didn't have any issues. Now you can see why the bubbles are so important. These were bubbles that were flatter, that were not as deep And these are deeper bubbles, and you don't have all those creases in the bubbles. So that's why it is so important to have a nice fat bubble in the bubble wrap. So I kind of want to just show you the difference. But on this guy, I did heat him up, and he will change back to the browns. I've got two different brands of caulking here too, which is also very interesting to me that they've turned different colors. So kind of stick with the one brand if at all possible. I like to leave these in so that if I mess it up, if you mess it up, you know why and how come it happened. So that's why I'm always leaving my bloopers in here so that you can see them. Now I've started to lift this up, and it's starting to get sticky. It stopped pulling really easy, and it's not dry in there. And sometimes you need to do that and lift this up so that it gets away from there, and it can continue to dry along the edges, and we'll continue to be able to pull that up a little bit by little bit. But that is the reasoning that this guy turned colors on us. At first I thought it was because I froze him, but this guy wasn't actually outside the night that we froze, but I put him back outside when it was a warm day, and it's the moisture. It does not happen with anything else I put outside because the moisture doesn't get trapped inside of here. So that is the reason being. So on the Be Sweet gourd, I did these in pieces, and I had originally cut the bubble wrap out, filled that up and stuck it on here, but I had to come in here and sand and clean, and I spent quite a few hours cleaning this up, whereas if we just do it in a sheet, we can just cut it out. But I want these to be thicker. I think they need to be thicker. So I'm going to add another layer on these before I continue cutting them out, and then we'll just cut them out, and then we'll just glue them on. We may do some silicone, or we just may do some straight glue, so we don't have to worry about it squishing around or anything. So I'm going to put another layer. So we're just adding another layer once that first layer has dried, and I probably wouldn't do it thicker. I would probably do it this way, so that once it's got off the bubbles, off the bubble wrap, this will be easier and faster to dry. Whereas if you did a real thick layer, it would be harder to get into the bubbles around that and have it dry. It'd take a lot longer. So that is the reasoning behind that. If I can get this lid off here. I had started to cut this out for another piece. So we're going to go ahead and use him. And then we're just going to do this just like we did when we did it the first time. Spread it around with our knife. I went to the thrift store today and paid 29 cents for some butter knives and some bigger spoons that I can stir my frosting with and things like that. So those kind of options are always good. Just about done here. You can do a little bit at a time if you're overwhelmed with doing too much of that. I thought I got my smaller butter knife here. It's empty. But I got my bigger one. Well, that's okay. The smaller one's easier for me to use, but the bigger one is great when you're going all the way across something, especially when I'm using it to do my lace patterns. If you have not seen those videos, you need to go check those out. We'll pull a blue box here, my butterfly box here, and show you that one. I need to get a video finished on that project. You can trim that up. That's not a big deal. Here is the lace that I'm talking about with my butterfly box. And that is so simple you wouldn't believe. We won't tell you about the dust on there right now anyway. And so I am just going to apply this all across. And this, like I said, will dry a lot faster, but it'll be thicker, and I think it'll look better in the long run than just a single layer. So I'm just going to go ahead and spread that around. So let's start applying this onto our gourd. And didn't this color really turn out cool? If I wasn't doing a gourd, and then if I'd left it alone, we'd end up with that color, and wouldn't have to color it, but that's okay. I went back and forth on color it before or after, and I think I'm going to put it on the gourd and then color it. So if I cut it, if I have any white that's going to come through from what I'm going to apply it with, you can think about that. So you could have used a template, and on my little guy, like I said, I used 3 pieces. But on this one, I think I'm going to try and do it in 2. If I had made this guy a little bit wider, the shape he is, we could have probably put him on with 1. Wouldn't that have been cool? But I'm too high back here, and I think that's just too much. And then when I bring it down a little bit, I'm not reaching over here. So anyway, let's piece it that way. We can show you how to piece it, and it will look good. Now this part on the bottom has all dried, and that looks really good. I like the texture. The color, because in the thinner places ended up maybe a little bit more red than I would have liked, but we're going to paint it all anyway. But we've got that texture on, so it'll help blend it in, and we may blend in a little bit more as we're going. So let's figure out, I divided this guy in half. So let's do half and half, and how we want that to go on here. And so I'm going to watch my ends. And what was really cool when we were doing this, I want to show you this part too. These ones on the side almost had a button. And if you had lined them up, you almost could have inlaid those buttons within buttons, and that would have gone perfectly. That would have been really cool. But we want to clean up our edges just a little bit here, and I'm not going to worry about it too much because I'm not going to necessarily be following this edge. And these guys are kind of hard because you're kind of going halfway through a button here. So we just want to kind of get a cleaner edge so we can start. And I want to have this, make sure this comes all down far enough, and here. So we're going to look at that guy right about there and right about there. I want to make sure I still have enough to do my gourd. So I'm going to trim this guy, and I'm not trimming it right yet. So, but I want to look at doing this all the way up, and I'm going to find a line. And by that I mean like right there or right here, where we can go all the way up that line and have a nice clean cut. So I'm going to use this line right here, and I'm going to cut on this side of it to give us complete bubbles. And if there's any that you need to clean up or that's too big, just come in and trim that. So we've got that trimmed. We've got that going at an angle. And what I'm looking at is, again, lining this up. We want to make sure that it's down far enough. And when we put our frosting, or if you glue it, you can do it two different ways. I'm going to try it with the frosting, but you can also glue it. So we're going to be using our caulking again as our glue and moving it around. Know that when you're working with your gourd is not even on both sides. I got one side that's way fatter, so I'm kind of trying to remember that and having to adjust to it. So know that when you're playing with that, if you move it around and it's not fitting your pattern, well, maybe your gourd has changed or you're not putting it right. So you may even want to kind of draw something towards the middle that kind of tells you where the front is. And we're going to use our caulking just like glue. I don't want too much, but I want to get it around the edges and of course on the inside. And you could spread it around with a brush. I'm probably going to use, you could use a little sponge brush. You could use a tough paintbrush. I'm probably going to use my fingers. We're going to see if that's enough here. We don't want too much, so we don't want it to take a long time to dry. We don't want to have to worry about that. Especially on our lines. Now the edges down at the bottom are probably still going to be messing with those a little bit, so don't worry about those being too much covered. We may have to come and take them off or add some if we need to, and that's okay. But on these lines that we know for sure we're going to use, make sure you get that up against there well. Nice and messy, just the way I like it. So, we're going to try and get this guy on here the way we want him. And like I said, this guy's got a mind of his own, so some of these areas seem shorter. We may have to add some more. We'll have to see. But we're going to have to kind of figure out how to work these areas in, because we've got too much of them. And what I am thinking is I'm going to be cutting a section out of them and then just putting them right together. See if I can do it with just one, or if I will need more than one. So, see that line right there? Stay on this side of it. And we're going to see where it fits on the other side. Or if we need to take a little bit more here. And I'm going to cut it on this line on this side. So we're cutting that square out. And I think I need to go one more down. We're going to take it one higher here. Trying to figure out what we need to do to get the sky laying straight. Remember, we've got bees and we've got flowers. We've got all kinds of stuff that we can put to cover that up. So don't get stuck thinking if it's not perfect. By the time we get done putting everything on it, nobody will know. You could even leave one open like that and put something with a scripture about the honeycomb or the bee. And see, this is the reason I didn't go ahead and paint it yet. But if you can kind of line these lines up with these lines so that it looks like it belongs as you're working, do that. If you can't, don't worry about it. We're going to cover those areas with flowers. If you're not getting it to cut well with your scissors, use your honeycomb. I'm not going to put it on the bottom because I don't know how far it's going to go on the bottom here. I do believe that is enough. But this works so much better. When I originally tried this, I had put the bubble wrap onto the gourd and it sealed in the caulking, and it would never dry. I just wouldn't dry and wouldn't dry. I mean, weeks and weeks of waiting for it to dry. And this is so much easier this way. So a lot of work goes into these videos, and I'm still learning. I'm still creating. I'm learning new stuff about this. So you may find something that works better for you, but I probably have 100 hours in this video so far, and that's not including editing. We want to kind of be careful and not get too much of our dab on top of this other row here. And I think I'm going to take this piece and cut it to match that piece. And I'm not going to worry about lining it up because it's just not going to line up, so that's alright. Unless you point it out. If you can line it up, and look how well I did line these up accidentally. I didn't mean to. These rows here. So I'm going to go down here. And until you put it on your gourd, you can make the patterns, you can try doing it, but the gourd is so different. Every shape is so different. And I think I'm going to do the same here, as I'm going to cut this guy right here, if I can still get him. Probably shouldn't be using my good marker. If you had got that on in one piece like I had originally showed you, that how if I'd had it wider we could have done one piece, that would have been awesome. Now some of that's just coming through from underneath because there was a hole there. So no, that is the reason. And if I had done the base a little bit thicker, you wouldn't be having that issue. So I've got this area right here that I think I need to put something back into. And I don't know if it needs to be angled or if it can be straight here. I think if we kind of it only needs to be about 3 rows. But you can see how you can piece this. If you need to. And if you can line it up better than I'm doing, then do that. I'm just trying to piece it together here. Not necessarily the right way. So I'm going to just try to blend this into the center part. And if you haven't done the bottom part yet, go ahead and put some around and spread it around, because you can do that because this part's already basically dried except for what we're gluing together. And just keep kind of checking that from time to time. Make sure it didn't slide as we're working on it. But we just want to clean this up so it doesn't look like it's a separate piece, just like it belongs or it blends in together. And keep it wider where it's meets the honeycomb. I'm going to take just a tad of water. I don't mix my water with my silicone, but we're just going to use it just to smooth this out. And I think because we're using it, not mixing it, it'll be just fine. So you have pretty much put your honeycomb onto your gourd.